Okay, so I'm going to preface this video by saying you should probably go watch Scott Junn's video on the same topic. The guy makes better arguments than I ever could, and he also got all of his points out in a much quicker manner than I could as well. The link to it will be down below in the description, and if you're too lazy to find it yourself, I'll also have it pop up on the screen at the end of this video. So the topic that I wanted to discuss in this video today is one that's been getting a lot of attention from the community for no real reason lately. And of course, it's the topic of deranking intentionally to play at lower ranks. Every person that does this has their own reasons for doing so, such as lower queue times, better ping in matches, easier matches, the list goes on and on. Whatever your reason for deranking is, I haven't a problem. It's an issue in other online games, and no matter what developers do, they cannot fix this issue. And most of the time what they do is apply a shitty band-aid fix that doesn't actually help. An example of this would be League of Legends with their Lever Buster system. The system doesn't actually punish people who leave games beyond putting them in a lower priority matchmaking queue. It doesn't fix any of the issues in the game. People still leave matches whenever they feel like it, and from what I can tell, they receive little to no punishment. If the devs for Dead by Daylight tried doing the same thing for this game, it wouldn't fix the problem either. And in the current state of the game, where people crash the desktop or have to restart their game in the middle of a match or disconnect from a match because of high ping and rubber banding, it would only cause more harm to the health of the game rather than fix it. So many people argue as well that the punishment for leaving should be harsher than just losing 2 pips. But if you make the person lose more than 2 pips, they're going to get to the lower ranks faster, and if it's the case of they just want to bully the lower ranked survivors and killers, that's exactly what they're going to do. All you're doing in this situation is making it easier for them, if that's your argument. At the end of the day, Dead by Daylight is an online game, and in every online game in existence, it has systems that could have been abused and they have been abused. Dead by Daylight is no different. The smurfing in League of Legends, the grenade spam in most Call of Duty games. You can continue this list with pretty much anything, such as abusive characters in Smash Brothers. The list can go on all day. The point of the matter is, it's not exclusive to Dead by Daylight. The number of times there have been game-breaking bugs for both Survivor and Killer side that can just make the game not fun is, well, it's pretty large of a list. A recent one that I can think of off the top of my head is the Tinkerer 2 bug that came out in the middle of the Summer Barbecue event. What this bug did was it removed the terror radius on the killer for the entire duration of the match. And for survivors, I am still finding people to this very day glitching themselves on top of props that the killers cannot touch them on top of. It's pretty fucking stupid. When you play Dead by Daylight, your fun in this game is at the mercy of the other players. No matter how many patches there have been and will be to nerf unfun aspects or buff things that just don't have any place in the game, such as, need we mention the most useless perk in the game, Left Behind. People will still complain at the end of the day. In Dead by Daylight, it could be a perfectly balanced game. In a perfect world, it would be a perfectly balanced game, but people would still have toxic playstyles, and people would still bitch about those playstyles on Reddit because the devs cannot fix these issues in a fair way. 2 of these changes that they made recently enough, so just so you guys have an understanding that they take both sides into consideration, is the exhaustion nerf for survivors and the hook camping nerf for killers. Now, to explain the exhaustion nerf that came out when the clown came out, is that exhaustion now applies whenever a survivor uses an exhaustion perk, and as long as they are sprinting, exhaustion will not go down. This also applies for perks that also affected exhaustion's depletion rate, such as Vigil. It still won't apply the effect so long as you are running. And this change was made initially to affect Sprint Burst, but the issue that comes from it is it just fucked over every other exhaustion perk. Sprint Burst is still to this day an unfun and uninteractive perk for both Survivor and Killer. It's just a boring piece of shit that starts every chase off with the Survivor gaining at least 2 vectors of a distance on the Killer. Let's go on to the Killer's change recently, which was hook camping, where if the Killer stays in the vicinity of the Survivor on the hook, unless there's another Survivor in the same vicinity, the Killer loses progress on their chase emblem. And guess what? This change, just like the exhaustion nerf, didn't affect hook camping. Not in the slightest. The only emblem that this affects, which is not even relevant to sacrificing survivors on the hook, is the chase emblem. And as well, the most I've ever gotten this emblem to go down, even with survivors doing gens and leaving the guy on the hook for the full duration without him even trying to Kobe, the most I've ever gotten it to go down is 8%. It's a joke. Especially since the chase emblem is not the one related to sacrificing, which you can still get pretty high if you just camp the hook, because altruistic survivors in Dead by Daylight will always kill themselves trying to save others. Another one of the constant complaints I see in this game that I agree with as a Killer main even is the perk No One Escapes Death, or NOED. It takes all of the fun or counterplay that survivors could have against killers and just flat out removes it completely from the equation. Keep in mind as well, I'm a Killer main that gets to rank 1 every single reset. This is not exactly an impossible feat to achieve, and anyone that would argue otherwise seriously needs their head examined. But I do this every single time without Ruin and NOED. The killers I'm showing on screen right now is my current roster on my current account. The only 2 that are not shown is Spirit and Legion, and I have Legion at level 40. I had Legion at level 40 before I did the same for Leatherface, and I got to rank 1 before I even finished unlocking all of Leatherface's teachable perks. I want NOED removed from this game myself. The perk is just not fun, and it removes all effort from the killer side of the game. The only nerf at this point that they could apply to NOED, apart from removing the move speed that you gain from it, which is negligible in itself, is to add the expose status to the survivor screen with the hex icon as soon as NOED becomes active, not after a survivor gets hit. And even then, the killer could still very easily knock down 1, 2, or even 3 survivors and make it impossible for anyone to save them. In fact, in the clip that I'm going to be showing on screen currently, I ran this Spirit around the log house for a good portion of the match. I barely lost much on the chases, and I could have still run the Spirit around long enough to run out the other 8th gate if she didn't have NOED. But because she had the perk, and I didn't know she had the perk, I couldn't play around it or do anything to prevent it. I just had to accept that I was going to get knocked down and placed on the hook, and no one was going to come and save me. Because again, in the very same situation, the survivors did exactly what every survivor does when they see NOED pop up on the screen and someone gets knocked down by it. They look for the nearest exit gate and they run out of it. And I'm sure I'm gonna get dickheads in the comments that are going to say, "Oh, but you should have just cleansed every totem to prevent NOED, lol." And yes, I could have wasted all of my time doing a secondary objective that has a decent enough chance of not becoming something that would be detrimental to my experience, instead of doing the generators like I should, and making sure that at least someone could escape out of the game alive. I could have done that. But that's not exactly a fun thing to do. And I know I deviated from the original topic here of intentionally deranking, but I had to explain to the 5 dipshits that don't understand that Dead by Daylight is a multiplayer game, that Dead by Daylight is a multiplayer game. Unless the game is made to be more competitive, then it never will be the competitive game that these dipsticks treat it as. This argument mostly comes from the killer side of the Dead by Daylight subreddit, which, by the way, if you don't want to have an aneurysm before the age of 20, then I suggest you don't read the discussion/solve topics on that subreddit. Just trust me on this. But hey, guess what? I have a special treat for you guys right here. I have a clip of a Freddy leaving the game as soon as it started. Now, I can't assume that he's deranking, even though it's close to reset and he probably is. Since killers DC just for getting a map they don't like, I can't assume this. But the point of this is, the problem is not Survivor exclusive. Treating it as such because you got shit on in a video game by a streamer that plays the game for 20 plus hours a week is just pathetic. In summary, this is still a video game at the end of the week. It's not even a heavily competitive one at that. Complaining about negligible shit like people deranking intentionally that has been an issue for a long time is not going to change anything. And as I mentioned before, any change that they could make it at the moment would be detrimental to the game's health, because in its current state, the game is not stable enough to support a system like this. And there are way more toxic things in the game than people intentionally deranking so that they can play at lower ranks. Grow the fuck up and just play the fucking game.